I never believed in curses. Not really. Not the gypsy hand over a cracked mirror kind. Not the sleep in an old house and wake up possessed kind. I believed in bad people, strange places, and things that don't make the morning news. But curses? No. That was superstition, and I made a living cutting through that kind of fog. That was before Greyhaven. Before the journal. Before the ink started writing me into its pages. It began on a Thursday. Rain, of course. The kind of cold mist that doesn't fall from the sky so much as it creeps in from the trees and seeps under your collar. I was driving through a winding road in the Oregon Cascades, the kind that feels older than pavement. Moss ate the road signs. Fog clung to the pines like smoke that didn't know where to go. I was here for a job, or what I told myself was a job. I freelance investigative pieces, mostly fringe stuff. Secret societies. Vanishing towns. Religious cults that never made it to Netflix. In Greyhaven, it checked all the boxes. Population, maybe 200. Main exports, lumber, silence, and rumors. And one dead priest, Father Elias Corvin. The estate sale was small, almost hidden. No signs, no advertising. I only heard about it through a blurry Craigslist post that said private sale, antiques, journals, ecclesiastical items. There was no address. Just GPS coordinates and a warning. Cash only. I pulled up to a rotting Victorian house with a sagging porch and a rusted bell hanging from an arch above the driveway. No cars. No people. Only a hand-painted sign that read, Corvin Estate, enter quietly. Do not go upstairs. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, the house smelled like dust and wet paper. Shelves lined the walls, every one of them crowded with candle holders, cracked Bibles, and strange things I couldn't name. Old jars with wax seals. Crucifixes carved in languages I didn't recognize, a dagger shaped like a serpent swallowing its tail. There was no one at the front. No cashier, no owner. Just a wooden donation box beside the door and another handwritten note that said, Take what you want. The dead have no use for things. I walked through the room slowly, phone light raised, every step creaking beneath me. Some part of me expected to find someone watching me from the shadows. But there was no sound but the rain tapping against the windows. And then I found the attic door. It was already open. A single bulb hung at the top, swinging gently, casting long shadows across the narrow staircase. I should have ignored it. The note said not to go upstairs. But I've never been good at following instructions, especially the cryptic ones. I climbed. The attic was different. Warmer. Like the air had been trapped there for 100 years. In the center sat a wooden table. Nothing else. Just that. And on the table, perfectly centered, lay a journal. Black leather. Red thread binding. It pulsed when I looked at it, like something inside was breathing. I stepped closer. The cover had a symbol carved into it. 2 interlocking circles, with a jagged line slashing through the middle. I opened it. The first page was blank. The second said, Entry 73. A man will enter the attic at 3:41 p.m. He will be wearing a black jacket and boots. He will be drawn to this journal. He will take it. He will never leave unchanged. I looked down at myself. Black jacket. Black boots. My breath caught. I flipped to the last page. The ink was still wet. It said, His name is Alex Mercer. I dropped the book. The light above me flickered. Somewhere below, a door slammed shut. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing a story. The story was chasing me. I didn't sleep much that night. The journal sat on the desk across the room like a bomb that hadn't decided whether to tick or not. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that final line from the last entry. The stranger in the red umbrella finds me today. That wasn't a coincidence. I was wearing a red umbrella-patterned hoodie when I found it in Father Corvin's attic. That line was about me. It had to be. But maybe, just maybe, I was tired. Stressed. Reading into things. People see faces in clouds all the time. That doesn't mean the clouds are watching back. By the time the clock hit midnight, I was still wide awake, staring at the ceiling of my motel room while the rain whispered across the windows. A heavy silence wrapped the town like a soaked blanket. No cars. No wind. Just water tapping the glass. I rolled over, facing the desk. The journal was open. I hadn't opened it. I sat up slowly, every hair on my neck rising like a slow wave. The pages were still. No flipping. No glowing. No cinematic nonsense. Just still. But a new entry had appeared. I hadn't written it. I swear. My pulse kicked up a notch as I got out of bed and walked over. The leather was warm again. Too warm. In a shaky hand, written in the same ink. The animals will gather under the moon, faces to the east, as if hearing the hymn of their final dawn. I blinked. Read it again. Then again. That didn't mean anything. Not really. Just weird poetic nonsense, right? Something Corvin wrote before he died? Could have been days ago. Weeks. But why was the ink still wet? I checked the time. 12:04 a.m. Okay. Time to step away. Deep breaths. Go for a walk. Clear my head. I grabbed my coat and left the journal on the desk, slamming the door behind me harder than I meant to. The motel's gravel parking lot crunched beneath my boots. Cold mist hung in the air, and the night had that wrong kind of quiet, like the town had stopped breathing. Then I saw them, on the shoulder of the road, maybe 30 yards out, just past the flickering motel sign. A line of animals. Stray dogs. A raccoon. 2 deer. A cat. Even a fox. They stood side by side, completely still, backs to me. All of them staring in the same direction, east. Toward the treeline. Toward the church ruins. I didn't move. Not one of them twitched. Not a paw. Not a tail. Then the humming started. Not loud. Not sharp. But a low, slow sound like a woman humming a lullaby underwater. It didn't come from the animals. It came from somewhere else. But they heard it. I could tell. Every single one of their ears perked up in sync. I wanted to move. To yell. To run. But I stood there frozen, watching something that didn't feel like it belonged to this world. The humming stopped. And all the animals, at the exact same time, sat down. Just sat. Like they were waiting for something. I backed away slowly, not turning my back until I was back in my room. The journal was still open. The ink glistened in the light. That line, it had just happened. Exactly as written. And this time, it didn't feel like a coincidence at all. I closed the journal, slid it under the bed, and sat with my back against the door until the sun started to rise. I didn't know what this book was yet, or what it wanted from me. But I knew this. I had read it. And now, something had read me back. The next morning, Greyhaven looked the same as it always did. Gray sky, stiff trees, and fog curling around every street sign like it had a secret to keep. But something had changed inside me. After what I saw last night, the dream, the footprints, I couldn't pretend I was just here for a story anymore. I sat in the diner near the edge of town, a place called Maggie's Spoon. The kind of place where the coffee's always lukewarm, and the regulars never blink when you walk in, just stare through you like you're already a memory. I had the journal open on my lap under the table, pretending to read a newspaper, but my eyes were locked on the entry from last night. The ink was still wet. The words hadn't faded. They never faded. I skimmed the sentences again. He dreams of the river and wakes wet-footed. The gate creaks open soon. The bell must ring again. It made my skin crawl, like something had reached out of the page and brushed against my soul. I had to know who wrote this. Back at the motel, I pulled out my laptop and typed the name scribbled on the inside cover, Father Eli Corvin. At first, nothing. Then, buried deep in some obscure blog about failed exorcisms and Vatican cover-ups, I found it, a mention in a forum post from 2011. Corvin was one of the last true demon hunters. Went off the grid after Rome revoked his authority. Last seen in Oregon, chasing something he called the Inkborn. Inkborn? Was that what was writing these entries? I followed the trail for hours, piecing together bits of old church bulletins, abandoned diocesan records, and conspiracy websites that even I usually avoided. Corvin had been a rising star in the church until 1997. Then something happened, something big. After that, he vanished. No funeral. No obituary. Just gone. But one line kept showing up in different sources. He who writes commands. He who reads obeys. That line hit me like a cold breath on the back of the neck. I turned back to the journal, flipping further into the past entries. One from 1982 caught my attention. The handwriting was more erratic, shaky, like someone writing during an earthquake. Blackwater calls louder now. Each word written feeds it. The town forgets, but the ink remembers. I burned the first journal. It grew back. I carved out my own tongue to stop the voice, but still I write. God forgive me. I keep writing. I sat back, stunned. This wasn't just some mad priest's diary. This was a war log. A record of someone trying, failing, to hold something back. Something that wanted to be written. It was using him. And now maybe it was using me. I needed answers. Real ones. Not from blogs or second-hand whispers. I remembered the old sheriff's station down the road. Maybe they had town records, death certificates, or, if I was lucky, something Father Corvin left behind. I grabbed my coat, the journal still humming faintly in my hands. That's the best way I can describe it. Not a sound, but a pressure. Like the pages were waiting for me to look again. As I stepped outside, I noticed the motel owner's dog, an old mutt named Baxter, just standing by the road, staring at me. His eyes were glassy, motionless, not blinking. Then he tilted his head slowly and let out a low, shuddering growl. Not at me. At the journal. I didn't wait. I got in the car and drove to the sheriff's station. I wasn't ready to believe it yet, but some part of me already knew. Father Corvin hadn't lost the war. He'd passed it on. I told myself I wouldn't read more. I really tried. After what happened with the animals on the road, I shoved the journal into the bottom drawer of the motel nightstand. I even piled old pizza boxes on top of it, like trash could keep evil shut in. But around midnight, I woke up. It wasn't a nightmare that pulled me from sleep. It was silence. Thick and unnatural. The kind that presses into your ears like cotton. Even the old wall heater had gone quiet. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, the kind of panic you feel when you know something is wrong but can't explain why. And then I saw it. The drawer was open. The journal was sitting on top of the pizza boxes, right in the middle of the floor. Its cover faced me, wide open like a dead mouth. I didn't move at first. I just stared at it, hoping I was still dreaming. But I wasn't. I crawled out of bed slowly, half hoping it would vanish if I blinked hard enough. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. The leather was warm, almost pulsing. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the new entry. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. The ink was still wet, curling like smoke on the page. The dream will return, but he won't wake this time. No name. No date. Just that one sentence in the center of the page, written in perfect black script. I whispered, "What dream?" And then I blinked, and I was no longer in the motel. I was on the edge of the Blackwater River. Fog coiled around my ankles like fingers. The moon was full but dim, as if hidden behind wax glass. Water flowed in slow, syrupy currents. It smelled wrong, like old metal and burnt hair. Then I heard the sound. Chains. Dragging across wet stones. Slow. Purposeful. I turned my head, and there he was. A man, or something like a man, cloaked in a long black coat. His head was covered by a hood, but I saw the glint of metal where his face should be. Not a mask. A mirror. A perfect, smooth mirror reflecting the moon above. He walked through the river without sinking. Chains dragged behind him, wrapped around his arms, his neck, his chest. He raised one arm and pointed straight at me. The reflection in his mirror face didn't show me. It showed my body lying in the motel bed, eyes wide open, mouth dripping with ink. That's when I screamed. And I woke up. I shot up in bed, soaked in sweat, gasping for air. My hands clutched at my chest to make sure I was really breathing. The room was quiet again, but my window was open, and on the carpet below it, clear as day, were wet footprints. They started from the window and stopped right next to my bed. I sat frozen for minutes, staring at them. Water glistened in the moonlight, thick, dark water like what I saw in the dream. I grabbed the motel's old Gideon Bible and shoved it under my pillow like it would help. My fingers itched to touch the journal again, to see if the entry had changed. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I stayed awake the rest of the night, eyes locked on the window, ears straining for chains. Something told me this wasn't just a dream. Something had come through, and it knew my name. I was sitting in a corner booth at the Hollow Pines Diner, stirring black coffee I had no intention of drinking. The rain outside smacked the window with soft, wet fingers. It had been raining for hours. The kind of rain that seeps into your bones and makes the world feel slow and heavy. I hadn't opened the journal in 2 days. Not since the footprints at my door. I'd locked it in the bottom drawer of my motel nightstand and shoved a chair against it, like that would help. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw pages turning on their own. Blank ones. Wet ones. Ones written in a language my brain didn't know, but my soul recognized. That morning, the bell above the diner door jingled, and a man walked in. Tall. Lean. No umbrella. His soaked black coat clung to his frame, and he had this calmness about him that immediately put me on edge. He looked around slowly, like he'd already seen the place in a dream. Then his eyes landed on me. I looked away too late. He approached without hurry, sliding into the booth across from me like we'd planned to meet. He didn't ask. He didn't smile. His eyes were pale gray, too pale. They didn't blink as much as they should. "You're Alex Mercer," he said softly. His voice was smooth, like water running over cold stone. I've been looking for you. I stayed silent. My hand brushed the handle of the knife tucked into my coat. Just in case. I'm not here to harm you, he continued, folding his wet hands neatly on the table. But I am here to warn you. About what? I finally asked. His eyes flicked to the waitress behind the counter, who was wiping down coffee machines. Then he leaned in. The journal. I felt something twist in my stomach. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, lying badly. Yes, you do. He studied my face. You found it. Or rather, it found you. As it always does. Something about the way he said that made the air feel colder. He reached into his coat, slow and careful, and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Not leather-bound like mine. This one was simple, brown, with the edges of the pages burned. I used to study books like yours, he said, before I stopped believing in rules. Who are you? I asked. He smiled faintly. Father Raul Mendez. At least, I was a father. Now, I suppose I'm more of a scholar. A collector of stories. What do you want from me? I asked. He tapped the notebook once with a single finger. What I want isn't from you. It's from the book. Then take it. I snapped, voice louder than I meant it. It's all yours. Mendez tilted his head, almost amused. If only it were that simple. The book doesn't serve whoever holds it. It serves itself. It writes what must be written. He looked out the window, watching the rain roll down the glass. The moment you opened it, Alex, you gave it a voice. And now it's writing you into the story. My throat went dry. It's just a book, I muttered. No, Mendez said, eyes sharp now. It's a mirror. And a mouth. And a wound that doesn't close. He paused. Then added, has it written you yet? Has it said your name? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His smile faded. You have to stop reading it, he said quietly. Every word you read becomes a door. And there are things behind those doors that should not be let in. I stared at him. Why are you helping me? Mendez looked tired then, like the weight of everything he knew had started to crush him. Because I once thought I could control it, he said. I thought if I read enough, wrote enough, I could shape what came next. But the book doesn't take commands. It takes sacrifices. He stood up. You're in the opening chapters now. The introductions. But the book always ends the same way. How? I asked. His pale eyes met mine. Badly. He turned and walked out into the rain, vanishing between parked cars and mist. I sat there for a long time, staring at the spot he'd just been. The coffee in front of me had gone cold, but I didn't notice. Back at the motel that night, I didn't go near the drawer. But at exactly midnight, I heard a creaking noise. Like wood bending under weight. The chair had moved, and the drawer was open. I spent most of the next day holed up in the cracked leather chair at the Greyhaven Library, surrounded by dusty newspapers and brittle town records. The journal sat open on the table, its ink dark and fresh like a wound that refused to heal. Every time I glanced at it, I felt a cold whisper brush my skin, like the shadow of something watching just behind me. I was desperate to make sense of the madness that had settled over this town. The journal's pages told stories, horrible, twisted stories, but they didn't feel like fiction. They felt like warnings. I began to map out the entries against Greyhaven's history, hoping to find some pattern, some proof that I wasn't losing my mind. It wasn't long before the pattern emerged. The journal described disasters and strange deaths that lined up with old newspaper articles. There was the school fire from 20 years ago, where half a dozen kids died and no cause was ever found. The town whispered about it like a ghost story, but the journal's words were precise. The same flames licking the walls, the same screams trapped in the smoke. Then there was the mass suicide 10 years back, a chilling event no one in Greyhaven liked to talk about. The journal recounted it in brutal detail, how the victims' eyes were open, staring into some unseen void, as if whatever took them had already claimed their souls. And worst of all, the drownings in the Blackwater River. Bodies found floating face down, marked with strange burn marks, just like the entries described. Each entry came with a time stamp, always written before the disaster happened. I closed the journal with a shaky hand and ran my fingers through my hair. How could this be? The journal was predicting the past, but also the future. Like a twisted record stuck on repeat, its ink bleeding history and fate all at once. That's when I noticed a folded, wax-sealed note tucked between the pages. The seal was cracked, and the wax was still soft, like it had been broken just hours ago. I broke it open carefully. The note was from Father Eli Corvin. His handwriting was uneven, hurried. The words burned into my skin like a curse. When one writes, one awakens. When one reads, one releases. Do not become the author. For the ink does not lie. It only demands a price. The air around me grew thick. I could almost hear a whisper crawling from the shadows. The story is not finished. Suddenly, the room's old radiator hissed and clanked, making me jump. I looked around, heart hammering. The librarian was nowhere in sight, the dusty silence pressing down like a shroud. I closed the journal again, feeling its weight, heavy like a promise and a threat wrapped into one. The next entry was already waiting for me at midnight, and I knew the horrors were only beginning. It was raining again. Greyhaven never stayed dry for long. The clouds rolled in like clockwork, as if the town was stuck on a broken loop. Cold wind whispered through the trees, and the scent of wet moss clung to everything. I zipped my jacket higher and stared up at the remains of St. Brigid's Church. The bell tower stood crooked and silent, like it was bowing towards something buried deep in the earth. The rest of the church had burned down 40 years ago, just blackened stone walls and a carpet of dead leaves now. But the tower still held on, tall and stubborn, like a warning that no one bothered to heed. I shouldn't have come alone, but I couldn't ignore the journal's latest entry. It had appeared last night in that same fresh, black ink. He will return to where it was sealed. Beneath the altar, a name forgotten. Next to it, his own. My name. Written there. Alex Mercer. I didn't sleep after that. I waited until morning, packed my flashlight, my recorder, and the journal, then drove to the old church grounds just outside town. There was no trail anymore. Roots and vines had swallowed what used to be a gravel path. I stepped carefully over broken headstones and half-buried crosses. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt, like I was walking through something thick and unseen. When I reached the tower, I hesitated. The door was gone, just a dark archway filled with shadows. The inside smelled like rust and rain. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped in. The stone floor groaned under my boots. Wooden stairs spiraled up into the darkness, but the journal hadn't mentioned going up. It said, beneath the altar. What altar? I walked through what used to be the sanctuary, now just a skeleton of its former self. Rain dripped from cracks in the roof above. Ivy covered the walls. But near the front, half hidden under rubble and time, I saw it, a slab of white stone. The altar. I dropped to my knees and started clearing it. Dust, broken glass, chunks of charred wood, until I found a symbol etched into the surface. A circle with jagged lines, like sun rays made of knives. The same symbol I'd seen in the journal's margins. Demon trap? Seal? Warning? I ran my hand along the edge. The stone shifted slightly. Hollow underneath. I didn't think. I just pulled. With a deep scrape, the altar slid a few inches to the side, revealing a hole in the floor just big enough for a person to crawl through. The smell hit me instantly. Earth, mold, and something metallic. Blood? I dropped my flashlight in and followed, feet first. It wasn't a room. More like a crawl space, maybe 4 feet high, lined with stone and old wooden beams. The floor was soft dirt. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw 2 things carved into the stone wall. One name was nearly gone. Erosion or age had chewed most of it away, but I could still make out the first letters. E.C. Eli Corvin. The second name stopped my breath. Alex Mercer. My hand shook as I reached out and touched the letters. They were real. Carved deep. As if someone knew I'd be here. As if they'd waited. Then I noticed the fresh scratches in the dirt. Words. I brushed away the dust and read them out loud. He rings the bell. It begins. A low rumble echoed above me. At first, I thought it was thunder. But then I heard it, clear and sharp. A bell. Ringing. I scrambled out of the hole and back into the ruined church. The air had gone still. No wind. No rain. Just the tolling of the bell, deep and slow, from a tower that hadn't worked in decades. Something moved at the far end of the sanctuary. A shadow. Tall. Watching. I didn't wait. I ran. Out of the church, through the graves, back to my car. My hands fumbled with the keys, engine growling to life just as the bell rang again. And again. And again. By the time I reached the motel, the sound was still in my head. It echoed in my bones. Back in my room, I dropped the journal on the bed. It was open. A new line had appeared. Now the author knows he's not alone. I woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but a thick, suffocating stillness, as if the world was holding its breath. No birds. No wind. Not even the buzzing of the motel's flickering neon sign outside my window. It was 5:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because the second hand on the wall clock had stopped moving. Just stuck there, twitching in place like it wanted to move but couldn't. My phone screen wouldn't turn on either, even though I charged it all night. No light, no sound, no signal. Just dead glass. I stood up slowly, careful not to make noise, though I wasn't sure why. Something about the air felt wrong, like it was watching me. I opened the motel door. Greyhaven had changed overnight. The streets were empty, but not the kind of empty you'd see in small towns at dawn. This was abandoned. Not a single car moved. Streetlights blinked like dying eyes. Every window I passed was dark, even though some houses should have had people inside getting ready for work or school. Then I heard it. Children's laughter. It came from somewhere near the old diner down the block. I followed it, half wishing I'd just stayed inside. The fog had returned, thicker than ever. It clung to my skin like wet cloth and curled between the buildings like it was alive. I turned the corner and froze. There were 3 kids standing in the middle of the road, holding hands in a circle. All of them faced inward. None of them moved. Their clothes were soaked, muddy, like they'd crawled out of a river. Then one turned to look at me. His eyes were black. Not just the pupils, the entire eyeball, glossy and bottomless. His mouth opened slowly, too slowly, and he whispered in a voice that didn't match his age. "He's writing you in reverse." I stepped back. My heart was slamming against my ribs. The fog swallowed the kids again like a curtain falling, and when it cleared, they were gone. I ran. Back to the motel, door locked, shades down. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the journal when I pulled it from my bag. Another new entry. The ink still glistened like it had just dried. "He will hear the bells, and then he'll remember." I didn't know what it meant, but something deep inside me stirred, a feeling I hadn't had since I was a kid. Not fear. Not exactly. It was memory. Faint and buried. Like hearing a song you can't place, but somehow you know every word. I didn't want to remember, but I couldn't stop it. My eyes drifted to the corner of the room, where my recorder sat on the table. I picked it up and played the last tape I'd recorded before meeting Mendez. Static. Then a voice. Not mine. Not his. "Stop reading. You're not the author. You're the ink." I dropped it. The recorder broke into 2 pieces. The voice still echoed in my head like it had been spoken aloud in the room. Something was unraveling. Not just the town. Me. Greyhaven wasn't just haunted, it was hollowed out. Like something had carved its way through the people, the memories, the truth, and filled the shell with lies dressed in flesh. I glanced out the window. A single figure stood under the street lamp. Mendez. He didn't move, just stared at my motel door. In his hand was a page, torn from the journal, and in blood it said, "He must ring the bell. It's how Legion enters. The church. St. Brigid's." I had to go back there. I didn't want to, but I knew now, the next chapter was waiting in the ruins. And it had my name written all over it. I sat in the corner of my motel room, the journal resting on the floor in front of me like a loaded weapon. The air smelled like mold and cheap bleach, but underneath it, I swore I could still catch the faint, coppery scent of blood. The windows were shut, the curtains drawn, and still I felt watched. I hadn't slept. I didn't trust what I'd see if I closed my eyes. Earlier, I'd tried burning the thing again. Took a lighter to the edge of a page and held it until my fingers blistered. The flame danced, hissed, but the paper remained cold and untouched. Just like the last time, only now the journal seemed amused. The next page filled in with a new line. "You are not the author." That phrase hit me harder than I expected. Like it knew I wanted control. Like it was taunting me. But if reading the journal made things happen, maybe writing in it could do the same. I took out a pen from my bag, just a regular ballpoint, nothing fancy. My hands shook as I held it over the page. I wasn't sure what would happen. Would it reject me? Possess me? Kill me? Still I wrote. "In the morning, the bird will rise again." Just that. One simple line. Then I closed the book, hands clammy with sweat. The air in the room grew still, like the motel itself was holding its breath. I didn't sleep that night either. When the sky finally began to lighten through the slits in the curtain, I stood and walked outside. Dew clung to the grass, and the cold morning air bit through my hoodie. The same dead bird I'd seen yesterday, black feathers, crushed chest, lay beside the dumpster behind the building. I waited. 10 seconds. 30. A minute. Then it happened. The bird twitched. One foot jerked, then the wing. Its chest expanded like a balloon filling with air. With a sharp wheeze, the bird flopped upright, shook its head, and took off into the sky like nothing had ever happened. I staggered back, mouth dry, breath caught in my throat. It worked. It actually worked. My stomach twisted, not with joy, but with fear. I went back to the journal and flipped it open. The line I wrote was still there. But something had changed. Underneath it, in the same old-fashioned ink as all the other entries, another sentence had appeared. You have taken the pen. Now the ink takes you. I backed away. No, this wasn't what I wanted. I wasn't trying to become part of the story. I just wanted to control it, to stop it. But the journal didn't care. It was alive, feeding off every word, every page, every fear. Later that night, I tried writing again, this time more detailed. Mendez will stay away. He will lose interest. He will leave Greyhaven tonight. As soon as I finished the last word, the ink began to curl. Not fade, curl, like it was rejecting the thought. The letters twisted into something unreadable, then reformed. Mendez writes too, and he writes in blood. The motel lights flickered. I froze. A knock echoed through the walls. Not at the door, at the window. I turned slowly. Outside the glass, in the pale light of the security lamp, stood Father Raul Mendez. He smiled at me. Not wide, not friendly, just a small, knowing curve of the lips. The kind of smile that said he'd been reading too. Maybe longer than me. He raised one hand and pressed a finger to the glass. Then, in the fog that clung to the outside window, he wrote a word. Soon. My knees nearly gave out. I blinked. And just like that, he was gone. I slammed the curtains shut and grabbed the journal off the floor. My hands were slick with sweat. My chest was pounding. Whatever this thing was, it didn't just predict the future anymore. Now it was letting us fight over it. And I wasn't sure I was winning. I woke up to the sound of rope tightening around my wrists. My head was pounding. My mouth tasted like metal. My vision blurred, but I could make out the outline of flickering candlelight above me and the smell of damp stone below. Cold. Wet. Like the breath of something waiting in the dark. I tried to move, but the bindings cut deeper with every twitch. Then I heard his voice. Finally awake, Alex, Mendez said, calm as always. Don't struggle. You're here by design. Not yours. His. I blinked until my sight sharpened. I was in the remains of the St. Brigid's bell tower. The altar, the broken stained glass, the splintered wood, all of it was surrounded by carved symbols that pulsed faintly. Some were written in chalk. Others looked like they were scratched in blood. The journal sat open on the altar. Its pages flipped slowly on their own. You brought me here? I asked, struggling to lift my head. No, he said. You brought yourself. That's how the journal works. You read it, you live it. You live it, it writes more. A perfect circle. Until the last chapter. He stepped into the light. Mendez was no longer hiding behind his fake academic charm. His collar was gone. His shirt was torn. Veins throbbed in his temples, like something alive was pressing beneath his skin. His eyes, they shimmered like wet ink. This is where it ends, he said, placing a hand on the journal. This is where Legion comes through. And this is where you die. The words hit me like ice. But I forced myself to look around. Behind him, the old bell swayed gently in the windless night. The rope that once rang it hung limp, but stained red. I saw something else, on the floor near my foot. A shard of glass. He stepped closer, holding a dagger carved with holy symbols, symbols now burned over by black runes. Blood is the final ink, he said. The journal doesn't just record. It feeds. It needs your fear, your truth, your story. But now it needs your end. The moment he turned to pick up a vial from the altar, I made my move. I kicked the shard with my foot. It slid just within reach of my bound hands. My fingers trembled as I grabbed it and twisted. Pain ripped through my skin, but the rope loosened. I freed my right hand. I reached out and grabbed the journal. You think you can stop prophecy? Mendez growled. You're a chapter, Alex. Nothing more. I dipped my fingers into my own blood. And I wrote, Mendez will fail. I will not die tonight. The journal quivered. The ink glowed red for a heartbeat. Then the candles blew out all at once. The wind howled, not outside, but from within the walls. The bell above us groaned. Something began crawling from the shadows behind the altar, black smoke with fingers. No! Mendez screamed. That's not the entry. That's not the true ending. The journal snapped shut. The altar cracked down the middle. The bell rang once, loud and low. The floor beneath Mendez split open. Something grabbed him, something with too many hands. He shouted in Latin, then screamed my name. Then he was gone. Swallowed into the pit. Silence followed. The shadows melted back. The bell stopped moving. The journal lay still. I stood there shaking, covered in blood, heart hammering so hard it hurt my ribs. My legs almost gave out, but I was still alive, and the journal was closed. For now. I picked it up and walked away from the altar, the ruins, and the thing that still lingered in the cracks of this cursed place. But as I stepped into the trees, the wind whispered something. It sounded like laughter. I don't remember how I got out of the tower alive. One moment, I was choking on smoke and Latin chants, Mendez howling in some twisted joy as the bell screamed overhead. The next, I was crawling through wet leaves, coughing ink out of my lungs. My palms were scraped raw. My shirt was half torn. The journal was still with me, clutched to my chest like it had fused to my ribs. I don't know if I ran or was carried. But somehow, I was in the woods outside Greyhaven. The storm was gone. The moon looked cracked behind the clouds, as if even the sky had been scarred by what happened at the tower. I sat up slowly. Every inch of me ached. Something stung my forehead, blood probably. My ears were still ringing, not from sound, but from the silence that followed. A silence that felt wrong. I opened the journal, half expecting to find the last pages burnt, torn, gone. But they weren't. The entries were still there, every cursed event, every nightmarish detail, and then my handwriting, rushed and shaking. Mendez will fail. I will not die tonight. And below it something new. The ink was fresh, glistening like oil under moonlight. But it wasn't mine. It said, "He stole the pen, but the author still watches." My throat closed. I looked around the forest. Nothing moved. No wind. No crickets. Just the quiet stare of dead trees and the river's slow breath far below. I should have felt relieved. Mendez was gone. The bell tower had crumbled like rotted bone. The demon, whatever Legion really was, should have been sealed again. But the journal wasn't finished. Its pages began flipping on their own, faster than before, as if the wind had found a voice and wanted to scream through every word. My hands trembled. I tried to slam the cover shut. It wouldn't close. The ink spilled upward, crawling like veins across the paper, forming words without my touch. A lie was written. Truth bleeds. Let the correction begin. I felt my nose sting. Blood dripped onto the page, and the ink drank it. Then it began to rewrite. My entry, the one I scrawled in the middle of that ritual, the one that saved me, was fading. Not vanishing. Rewriting. My words twisted, letters shifting as if they were worms made of shadow. What once read "I will not die tonight" now flickered like a bad signal, changing into "He delayed the death. It still comes." I dropped the journal. It landed spine up on the ground, breathing. I swear it breathed, slow and steady, like lungs buried under leather. I backed away until my spine hit a tree. No, I wasn't going to run again. Not this time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a lighter. A beat-up, red plastic one I'd used to light cheap motel candles. My thumb rolled the flint. A flame danced up, small and honest. I bent down, opened the journal. It had stopped writing. The last page was blank, waiting. I held the flame beneath the edge of the cover. The journal didn't burn. The flame bent away like it was afraid. The paper didn't even darken. It just sat there, smug and silent. "You're not done with me, are you?" I whispered. The journal's leather curled slightly at the corner, like it was smiling. I picked it back up, teeth clenched. "Fine," I said. "But I'm writing the next entry. Not you." And in the center of the blank page, with a pen stolen from Mendez's coat, I wrote, "The story ends when I say so." The ink didn't fight me this time. It sank in deep. The journal went quiet. For now. I stuffed it into my backpack and walked toward the faint lights of Greyhaven. My legs were weak. My mind felt like it had been cracked open and patched together with whispering glue. But I kept going. Because if I stop, I know what'll happen. It'll start writing again. And next time, it won't give me a pen. It's been 41 days since Greyhaven. I count them. I mark each one with a scratch on the inside of my closet wall, like some prisoner pretending freedom means something. It helps. Sometimes. The journal was gone. I was sure of it. The last time I saw it, it had fallen into the river with Mendez's body, swallowed up by a churning mouth of black water and broken stone. I left Greyhaven in a daze, blood caked under my nails, half a dozen scars I couldn't explain, and the sound of the bell tower still ringing in my skull. No one believed me, of course. Not the police. Not the paramedics. Not even the woman who drove me back to Portland. She kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror like I was some sort of rabid animal. I didn't blame her, because I was starting to feel like one. Since then, I've tried to return to a normal life. Rent's past due. Coffee tastes like paper. My hands twitch when I hold a pen too long. I threw out every notebook I owned. Can't even look at leather without flinching. But tonight changed everything. It was just after midnight. I had fallen asleep on the couch again with the TV whispering some rerun nonsense. I woke up to a sound, a light scratching, like nails brushing paper. At first, I thought it was in my head, but then I saw it, the journal, sitting on my desk, the same cracked leather, the same red thread hanging from the spine, still warm. I don't know how it got there. I live on the 3rd floor, and I always lock the door. Always. I stared at it for a long time, afraid to touch it, but part of me was already unraveling. I stepped closer. The journal was open, and only one sentence was written on the page. He thought the story was over. He was wrong. I didn't write that. I slammed the journal shut and backed away. My heart was thudding, loud and painful. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. And when I looked toward my window, my reflection was staring back. But it wasn't me. It looked like me. Same face. Same eyes. But it was smiling. And I wasn't. I turned to run. The lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the room. I swear something cold brushed past me, like a breath without a body. I fumbled for my phone. The screen lit up. It was full of new entries, written in the Notes app, in my handwriting, but I never typed a single word. The entries were dated for the next 7 nights. They described things I haven't done yet, places I haven't gone, people I haven't met, and how they'll all die. I dropped the phone, but I couldn't stop shaking, because the last entry was only 5 words long. He becomes the next author. The journal is still here. I haven't opened it again, but I can feel it watching me, waiting. And the worst part, my hand's starting to itch. Like it wants to hold a pen. Like it wants to write. The story isn't over. Not even close.